Your presence here is not accidental. There is a reason this message found its way to you. Trust that inner pull which keeps urging you to search for meaning and answers. This did not arrive through coincidence or random chance. Deep within, you have been looking ahead towards something unknown, perhaps for days, weeks, or even longer, waiting for a sign, a confirmation, something that can finally settle the unrest inside you. You have been carrying this weight quietly, often alone, hiding it from others because you feared they would not understand. You stayed silent to avoid being labeled as someone who overthinks or imagines too much, or someone holding on to something unreal. Yet despite everything, that inner voice within you has remained louder than outside opinions. It has stayed with you in early mornings and late nights, present in your stillest moments, gently insisting that you pay attention. Even when you tried to ignore it, distract yourself, or move on with other things, it never truly left. You did not create this feeling consciously. It is something deeper, something that keeps rising to the surface no matter how much it is pushed down. And what if this feeling is not a burden at all, but a signal from within you pointing towards something real and meaningful? What if the reason it refuses to disappear is because it does not come from fantasy or wishful thinking, but from a deeper part of you that already knows something your conscious mind is still trying to understand? A part of you that has always sensed the truth, even before you had the words for it. Today, something within awareness tries to gently confirm what you have often felt, but hesitated to fully accept. Out of fear, past pain, or caution, you may have silenced your inner knowing. You may have told yourself that what you feel is too intense or too fast to be real. But even after trying to suppress it, the feeling keeps returning. It does not fade away easily, and that persistence itself carries meaning. There is a reason this experience keeps coming back into your awareness. It is meant to help you understand why your emotions respond so strongly to a particular connection. Why it feels unlike anything else you have experienced. Why distance does not weaken it, and why silence does not erase its presence. Even when logic tries to interfere, something deeper continues to hold its place. This is not something random or meaningless. It feels more like recognition at a deeper level, something beyond surface emotions or passing attraction. It touches a part of you that feels familiar, even if your mind cannot fully explain why. You may have tried to reason it away or distract yourself, but the intensity remains unchanged. Every attempt to suppress or ignore it has only made it more noticeable, because when something is rooted in deeper awareness, it does not disappear simply because the mind resists it. Something within keeps drawing you back to the same realization, the same emotional truth that feels impossible to fully ignore. You are not imagining it, and you are not losing control of your thoughts. What you feel has depth, and it arises from a place that is not easily influenced by surface reasoning. It continues to exist even when circumstances change, even when distance grows, even when silence replaces communication. This is where confusion often enters. The mind tries to label it as attachment or emotional dependence, while another part of you senses it is something different. The mind, shaped by previous experiences and fears, tries to protect you by questioning everything. It uses doubt as a shield, even when it cannot fully explain what you are feeling. But deeper connections are often not understood through logic alone. They are experienced through signs that do not always match ordinary emotional patterns. One of those signs is a quiet sense of inner stillness that can appear even in uncertainty. Instead of constant panic or fear, there can be an unexpected calm that feels unusual but real. This calm does not come from external behavior or reassurance. It comes from within, from something that feels already recognized on a deeper level. Even distance does not always disturb it in the way ordinary connections would be affected. Instead, there can be a sense that the connection itself is not easily broken by physical separation. Another sign is how much this experience can awaken something inside you. It may reveal parts of yourself that were previously hidden or dormant. It pushes you toward reflection, growth, and self-awareness in ways you did not expect. It becomes like a mirror, showing you aspects of yourself you may not have fully noticed before. Through this process, you may feel yourself evolving, not because of external pressure, but because something inside is being activated. It can feel like a call to become more aware, more conscious, and more aligned with who you are becoming. This transformation often happens quietly but deeply. The intensity of the feeling is also something that stands out. It does not behave like temporary emotions that fade with time or distraction. Instead, it can persist, returning again and again, even when you try to move away from it. This persistence can feel confusing, but it also carries significance. Ordinary emotional dependence tends to weaken with distance or time. Fear of loneliness fades when new distractions appear. But when something continues to remain steady despite changes, it often points toward a deeper emotional imprint that is not easily dissolved. This experience may also bring questions about destiny and timing. You may wonder why, if something feels so meaningful, there is still distance or silence present. These questions naturally arise when emotions feel strong, but circumstances do not match expectations. Yet some experiences unfold gradually. Not everything appears fully formed at once. Some connections, whether emotional or deeply personal, develop through phases of distance, reflection, and inner growth. The absence of immediate clarity does not always mean absence of meaning. What has taken root within you is not something easily erased. Time, silence, or uncertainty do not simply remove what has already made an impression on your inner world. Instead, it often continues to exist in the background, shaping thoughts, emotions, and self-understanding in subtle ways. And as this continues, the most important part is not rushing to label it, reject it, or force it into a definition. It is to observe it honestly, understand how it affects you, and recognize what it reveals about your inner emotional world and personal growth. Because in the end, what stays with you is not just the feeling itself, but what it awakens within you over time. Even when the path appears blocked, no matter how wide the gap feels, how heavy the silence becomes, or how much effort either side puts into moving forward, there are connections that cannot simply be broken. There are bonds the ego tries to force into endings, yet the deeper self refuses to accept closure. Some connections only pause because both souls require time to evolve, to heal old wounds, and to become capable of holding the depth of the love that is meant for them. This person holds a meaningful place in your life story, not only because of your personal emotions or desires, but because something greater than individual will seems to be unfolding beneath everyday reality. A higher awareness appears to have placed purpose within this connection, shaping it as a space for emotional expansion, inner growth, and deeper awakening that must unfold in its own timing. Nothing about this meeting feels truly accidental. Nothing about the emotions that arose within you seems random or meaningless. Even when the mind attempts to convince you that it was temporary or simply a passing chapter, something deeper inside resists that conclusion. At your core, there is a knowing that this experience is not easily closed or forgotten. The reason is simple. It does not feel complete. It does not feel finished. What you are experiencing is not an ending, but more like a pause within a larger cycle. A quiet phase of preparation, an unseen transition that is still unfolding. The confusion, emotional intensity, and temporary distance are not signs of failure, but indicators that something is still developing beneath the surface. Both individuals involved often need time to grow, to heal internal patterns, and to release emotional conditioning that could disrupt the connection if it continued without transformation. Deep bonds are rarely formed between unprepared versions of people. Instead, life seems to bring together souls with potential, and then time shapes them into alignment. Separation, in this sense, is not always loss. Sometimes it becomes the process through which strength, clarity, and emotional maturity are built. What appears as distance from a human perspective may actually be space created for inner development from a broader perspective. Growth often requires periods of stillness and reflection. From a higher level of awareness, time is not perceived the same way as it is through human emotion. What feels like delay may simply be preparation. What feels like silence may actually be alignment happening in unseen ways. The destination is already known in a broader sense, even if the present moment feels uncertain. There is also an important shift that occurs during such experiences. They are not meant to break you, but to transform you. Emotional intensity often reveals hidden parts of yourself, bringing buried fears, attachments, and expectations into awareness. This process, although uncomfortable, plays a role in emotional purification and self-understanding. Confusion itself does not always indicate being on the wrong path. Sometimes it is a transitional state between old perception and new awareness. It is the space where intuition and logic temporarily conflict, where the heart senses meaning while the mind struggles for explanation. That tension often signals inner transformation rather than error. This phase of distance and quiet is not emptiness. It is adjustment. It is the rearranging of emotional patterns, beliefs, and inner responses. It allows both individuals to return to themselves separately, to confront internal limitations, and to release emotional habits that may have restricted growth. When two people meet before they are emotionally ready, the intensity of the connection can become overwhelming. Without inner stability, even meaningful bonds can turn into emotional chaos. That is why life sometimes creates distance, not to erase connection, but to protect its potential from being damaged prematurely. This pause acts as a protective mechanism, allowing both individuals to develop emotional balance before re-encountering the depth of what they share. Instead of forcing a connection through instability, time allows it to mature naturally. In this way, separation becomes part of preservation rather than destruction. What feels like being left behind is often a phase of internal realignment. It is a period where illusions dissolve, emotional dependency weakens, and self-awareness strengthens. It is not about forgetting the connection, but about refining the inner state from which the connection is experienced. At a deeper level, there is an unspoken agreement between growth and timing. The bond does not necessarily disappear during this phase. It evolves internally, while external circumstances appear still. Emotional distance does not always reflect the actual state of inner connection. As this process continues, both individuals are shaped by their own experiences. Even if it is not visible, inner transformation is occurring on both sides. One may become more introspective, while the other may resist understanding what they feel. Yet both are influenced by the same underlying shift. What appears as detachment from one side may actually be emotional struggle. What looks like indifference may be avoidance of deeper feelings. Often, people construct mental explanations to protect themselves from emotional vulnerability, even when deeper awareness contradicts those explanations. However, such protective narratives cannot permanently suppress what is internally significant. Over time, emotional truth tends to surface, even if it is delayed. The process of realization may differ for each individual, but inner clarity eventually challenges denial. The experience is not designed to create suffering, but to guide transformation. It pushes individuals to face unresolved fears, emotional patterns, and inner limitations. Through this, a stronger and more conscious version of the self gradually begins to emerge. What is happening is not stagnation, even if it appears that way externally. It is preparation. Emotional growth does not always move in a straight, visible line. Sometimes it unfolds internally first, before becoming evident in external reality. As inner clarity strengthens, the emotional energy between both individuals naturally begins to shift. It becomes less chaotic, more stable, and more grounded. Growth is not about waiting passively, but about evolving into a state where connection can exist without emotional imbalance. This process also involves recognizing that wholeness cannot depend on another person. Emotional completeness must develop internally first. Otherwise, connection becomes dependency, and dependency leads to fear rather than love. True emotional alignment requires inner stability. As inner healing continues, the emotional space between individuals transforms. What once felt uncertain begins to feel clearer. What once felt overwhelming begins to feel more balanced. This shift is gradual but meaningful, and it reflects internal development more than external change. Even though silence may still exist outwardly, transformation is still taking place inwardly. The absence of communication does not necessarily mean absence of connection. Often, deeper processes unfold in silence, away from visible expression. What feels like separation is also a form of unseen communication between internal states. Each person is moving through their own emotional evolution, whether consciously or unconsciously. This evolution is necessary for any meaningful connection to become sustainable. And through all of this, the most important realization is that emotional experiences of this depth are not meant to be rushed or forced into conclusions. They are meant to be understood gradually, as awareness expands and personal growth unfolds over time. It makes memories more vivid and sharper. It transforms the very things that once provided comfort into reflections that reveal what they are trying to avoid. This is why, even in silence, their inner world becomes more active than ever. They are confronted with thoughts they cannot pause, emotions they cannot explain away, and a connection they cannot fully control. The distance they created in an attempt to feel safe has now become the very space where truth echoes the strongest. The ego has always acted as their shield. It is the part that resists surrender, fears vulnerability, and avoids uncertainty. It is shaped by past wounds and refuses to step into anything unpredictable. But deep connections do not rely on prediction. They rely on truth. And truth is something the ego struggles to accept. So while the ego builds resistance, something greater slowly begins to dismantle it. In this process, silence becomes a tool of transformation. The universe does not rush this breaking down. Instead, it unfolds gradually, removing distractions one by one. The things that once gave comfort no longer provide the same relief. What once kept them occupied begins to feel empty, and in those quiet moments, your presence returns in their awareness without invitation. Not as imagination, but as recognition. Not as fantasy, but as something that feels undeniably real. The mind tries to hold on to logic, but intuition continues to interrupt with reminders that cannot be ignored. This is not obsession. This is internal alignment, unfolding in a way that cannot be easily explained. They are not silent because they have forgotten. They are silent because remembering has become overwhelming. The ego is weakening, and the emotional truth they tried to suppress is resurfacing with more intensity than before. Silence is no longer comfort. It is a space of internal confrontation. This inner struggle becomes necessary for transformation. Without it, nothing truly changes. Without this phase, old behaviors would repeat themselves, and emotional patterns would remain intact. The breakdown of internal resistance is what prepares a person to return to connection in a more conscious and stable way. The universe allows this internal unraveling not as punishment, but as preparation. Old fears, pride, and emotional defenses begin to dissolve slowly. What once protected them now becomes something that limits them. And through this process, clarity begins to emerge from confusion. Both individuals involved in this experience are moving through their own form of transformation. Even if it is not visible externally, internal change is taking place. The process is not one-sided. It is mirrored in different ways, shaped by each person's emotional structure and awareness. While one may seek clarity, the other may resist it. While one moves toward understanding, the other may struggle with acceptance. Yet both are influenced by the same underlying force of growth. One approaches awareness willingly, the other resists it, but neither remains untouched. What appears as distance is not always emotional absence. Sometimes it is internal conflict. What seems like indifference is often emotional suppression. People often create narratives to protect themselves from vulnerability, even when deeper awareness contradicts those narratives. But emotional truth does not remain hidden indefinitely. Over time, internal resistance weakens and clarity begins to surface. The mind may delay acceptance, but it cannot permanently silence what the deeper self already knows. This experience is not meant to break a person down without purpose. It is meant to bring hidden emotions into awareness, so that they can be understood and released. Through this process, a more grounded and self-aware version of the individual begins to form. Confusion is often misunderstood. It is not always a sign of wrong direction. Sometimes, it is the transition between old understanding and new awareness. It is the space where emotional certainty is being rebuilt from within. This phase of silence and distance is not emptiness. It is restructuring. It is emotional reorganization happening beneath visible reality. It allows both individuals to return to themselves separately, to face internal limitations, and to grow beyond them. When emotional intensity arises before readiness, it often leads to instability. That is why distance sometimes becomes necessary. It prevents premature emotional collapse and gives time for internal balance to develop. This pause serves as protection, not separation. It prevents the connection from being consumed by fear, dependency, or emotional overwhelm. Instead, it allows both individuals to evolve into versions of themselves capable of sustaining deeper emotional bonds. What feels like being left behind is often a period of unseen development. During this time, emotional attachments are refined, expectations are adjusted, and inner awareness deepens. The connection does not disappear, it transforms beneath the surface. At a deeper level, both individuals are undergoing change simultaneously, even if their experiences differ in expression. Internal growth does not always mirror external behavior. One may appear distant while still experiencing emotional awakening internally. Silence, in this context, is not absence. It is transition. It is the space where old emotional patterns are breaking down and new understanding is forming. It is uncomfortable, but it is also necessary for long-term emotional stability. As this process continues, the emotional energy between both individuals gradually shifts. It becomes less chaotic, more stable, and more grounded. Emotional maturity begins to replace emotional reaction, and clarity begins to replace confusion. True connection cannot be sustained through dependency. It requires inner wholeness. When a person is not emotionally complete within themselves, connection often becomes a source of fear rather than peace. That is why inner healing is essential before external reunion can be meaningful. As self-awareness strengthens, emotional responses begin to change. Fear reduces, understanding increases, and emotional balance becomes more stable. This internal shift naturally reflects in how connection is experienced. Even without external communication, transformation continues. Silence does not stop emotional development. Often, it deepens it. It forces reflection, introspection, and internal honesty that may not occur in constant interaction. What feels like separation is also a form of internal communication between evolving states of awareness. Both individuals are moving through their own emotional journeys, shaped by reflection, experience, and time. Through all of this, the most important realization is that such experiences are not meant to be rushed into conclusions. They unfold gradually, revealing meaning layer by layer as emotional maturity develops. What remains is not just the feeling itself, but what it awakens within you over time.